What's up, everyone? It's Winslow, and I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, look at what you have in what you're writing. Say it's a piano idea, it's any kind of melodic idea. If you want to flesh it out, try taking a piece of whatever it is, probably something chordal. If it is one singular line, build a chord on it, reference a note of that chord, so a voice. This would be voicing. And then double that in another instrument to add a bit of texture, a bit of color, to add depth and musicality. That's kind of a really basic way of putting it. Take two of this intro. Not that you need to know that. Anyway, let's talk about layering in this video. And what I mean by layering in this case is, you can see like my little notes up here. In regards to like instrumentation and arrangement. Instruments meaning the instruments you're using, like you got a bass sound, you may have another sound, that you might have a piano, your strings and stuff like that. I don't know why it's not necessarily spoken of in that way within like electronic music production kind of circles. It's always like instrumental composers, stuff like that, but we're all basically doing the same things with different instruments or sounds. So I feel like, my usual shtick of putting it in this context, give you something to think about. And that's what we're gonna do. So let's move forward a little bit. Store instrumentation, again, away from the usual production thing. So like a lot of times you might hear, oh, you need to layer that. And you're usually layering, again, for a specific sound, but you're usually thinking about from like a frequency, kind of sound design, kind of sub bass, mid bass, high frequency fizzle on a bass or something, or some kind of just things of that nature in more of a sound design perspective, but not necessarily a writing and arranging the track kind of perspective. So why would you want to do that? It gives it a bit more depth. You can add a bit more texture, different colors, emotions, if you want to call them that. They're on, like in, say, classical music, you might have, piano playing, solo piano, and it has like a specific melody line. How do you bring that melody line out for that few measures? Make the violins play the same thing. You got the cellos playing something, Lord of the Rings style, or I'm thinking of Pirates of the Caribbean now for some reason. Then you have the trumpets play that same line. Trumpets, trombones, low brass to reinforce that sound, but has added texture on it. Strings, brass, it creates a stronger, more full sound. So in this case, we can do something similar and layer instruments, whether it be pianos or sounds from a synth. You can call them whatever you want at that case, but they're all instrumental layers that should contribute to an overall fuller or more realized sound, Like a piano on its own sounds fine, of course. Piano with a string, that's a different color. Piano with a string, and then the lower register has something, maybe a sub under it. Now it's got a lot more weight, but you hear it as that piano line, as one melodic idea. So that's kind of what we're getting to. It's a very long way. I could have put that in my notes. I just read it from it. But anyway, you're used to this by now. So for my example, we're going to go into my project, Mumbles of Grace, because I can actually break that one down. And instead of talking about, any other tune, although I will have some other things, other artists and stuff you can reference. Listening to New Tone's latest album, Little Spaces, kind of got me in this headspace, even though I wrote this way before that. But so it's something I've been thinking about for a while, as you can tell. Anyway, so Mumbles of Grace, if you haven't heard it, go listen to it. It'll be linked in the description. I did do a full track breakdown, but I did kind of go over this, but I do want to just kind of do it on its own video. So yeah, one more thing, because I'm waffling. You can probably see the little chapters thing in the bottom. Feel free to skip around or skip past this part. Yeah. So the section is just kind of the drop sections, and I'll do it without drums right now. that's kind of the first part, and then the second half, it's more or less the same thing. You'll understand when you hear it, but it's little developments and taking that same kind of riff, chord progression, and taking it different places.
Say something.
I'm gonna play this out so you hear it a bit more.
Say something.
All right, so there, pat myself on the back. That took forever, but I really like how it just works as one cohesive melodic line. And even though there's pieces of this and this sound and everywhere else, it's all very much the piano and the chords and how I chose to move between those chords. So I think this will be a good example of what I'm trying to accomplish in this video. And, you know. So first you got the bass line, or actually first, it's all built around the piano in this section. So we're going from chord to chord, but you have these passing notes. And what do we do with those passing notes? Like I said, you want to accentuate an idea, maybe a few notes, maybe a few measures. You move in the same way with a different instrument or different layer. So the sub moves with the bass note of the piano. So all right there. So it's not necessarily a note for note thing, but it's the moving notes, the passing notes from chord to chord is where it moves, while still maintaining that it moves to the next chord. So it's giving you something to anticipate, but it's also providing movement. It's like instead of one person passing by, it's a group of people, but each group of people looks a bit different. So you're like, it keeps your eye like, oh, who's coming next? That kind of thing. Weak analogy there, but it's there. And on that same note, not in this section, but in the next 16, we have that top line that want to accentuate that, add a bit more color, a bit more texture, add the strings. Now, this is one thing I tried a lot. I had the strings doing the same thing as piano at first. Not the exact same chords, but it did go from the dun 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 dun, just that resolution, dun dun, and I took it out. And it makes a huge difference. Actually, turn this back into an instrument and we'll put it in. Plug in. Beautiful, beautiful. So now this would be, let's do without it. See, that to me feels a bit longing, like it doesn't resolve. Bum, bum. And you know it's supposed to go bum, bum, but it never makes it there. Now let's do it without it. Or, oops, do it with it, I mean. That doesn't have the same feeling. It feels like the idea is resolved, finished, almost. And part of it is because I've heard this 1,000 times, so I know it shouldn't happen, but I just put it in there and now it feels weird. But again, take it out. It's, again, kind of conversational. It's call and response. But in this case, someone like interjects from outside of the conversation. And then, someone cuts them off to finish what they were going to, So what else? Because all these are bits and layers. Again, you can kind of see what I'm trying to accentuate. Even my goofy like vocal sample, which is me and my girlfriend.
Say something.
That's even a note. That's still a note in the chord, loosely. But because it's speech, it doesn't necessarily have to be dead in tune, but it works. And what that is accentuating the lower note in the piano. So the bum, because it starts bum. And so to accentuate that, vocal sample same time. I didn't even do it. Made the wrong thing.
Say something.
And again, in this section, I didn't resolve. Why am I pointing at the screen like you can see it? So we have this pizzicato and the strings, right? And I told you I didn't put that note there to resolve it. But what I did do is put a different sample it's roughly within the chord of the piano. But it actually changes the texture because it adds a few notes, extends the chord. I don't want to think about the actual notes right now, but the sample fits, so I left it in there. So when this chord resolves, you get the... And it's automated out of a low pass filter, so it feels like it's coming out of the chord, coming out of the sound. So if that was like an instrumental piece, it'd be like the violas, that's me, crescendoing from piano to forte, so it feels like they're coming out of the orchestra to bring whatever part they're going. Also, I'm gonna just say this right now. I know this might seem like a lot. I don't exactly think of it this way when I'm writing, like, oh yeah, we're bringing this out, it's coming this way, and then there's a story, then there's the analogy. This is just a way for me to kind of relate what I'm thinking of, because at this point, I kind of know this. Or I, subconsciously I'm thinking of, yes, this and that, but specifically I'm like, okay, here's some notes. What can I add to it to give it a bit more flair, a bit more texture? That's usually the basis of this idea. And then the analogies and goofy stories come later. Anyway, so this whole line is now, it goes from the piano. Let's listen with this to the piano, right? Just the basic idea. And I do that in the first half of the section. Just leave the piano kind of by itself. There's vocal samples and stuff, but it's not as realized. But when you add the bass moving along, you add the pizzicato, you add the little vocal stab words in there, and you add that kind of crescendo-y chord bit, you get something a bit more full and with a bit more depth to it, in my opinion.
Say something.
Oh yeah, there's one more part to this whole sequence. Is on the last chord. You get the and you get another string swell. So and the developing delay with the pitch bends and the strings, and it's all still the same idea, same melodic thing. This really isn't as hard as it might seem at first. It's just taking a note out of the chords and doubling it in another instrument or another sound. Like just for, yeah, I mean, let's look at the bass by itself. I mean, this goes through the whole track. Sub, Moogie type mid bass, Rhodes, piano, just playing one note. Now that's more of like, that's kind of blending the two, layering with an instrumentation and layering for like frequency sound design kind of thing. So you got the sub, a mid gritty moog type sound, and then Rhodes. 3 different textures, 3 different uses. One is the sub, low end body. One gets a bit more mid range, a bit more color, timbre. The other one kind of fills up the stereo space a little bit, the Rhodes, and adds another kind of moving chorusy texture. And they kind of work against each other as well because of frequencies and then chorusing and doubling. in tune, out of tune, that kind of thing. And you only really know that's going on if you're really listening intently, because it's kind of a dense mix the whole way through. But if I took it out, it would feel different, you know? Like just taking out the Rhodes. It's a bit more, it feels a bit more empty, a bit less. Put the Rhodes back in, fill up a bit more space. That kind of, that little melodic idea right there, like, is all three of those and the piano. No, it isn't. I thought it was. It is in a different spot. Right here. Even this is kind of playing, and this is more of a notes composition thing. But you know how I was talking about the pizzicato before, how it doesn't resolve with the piano chord. So let's solo that real quick. Better than that. Like the piano chord resolves, the pitch doesn't. Over here, it's a similar thing with the bass and the piano. You feel it, like it gives you the idea that bum 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 should be the last of that idea, but then the piano comes bum bum, and it's still the same chord, but it's because it's split. It feels a bit unresolved, even though it's more or less bass notes. Rest of the chord comes a beat later, half a beat later. Another writing thing. So while this video isn't as focused, it's getting all these ideas about the writing, the arrangement, the instrumentation side. But there aren't a lot of videos on, so you know that's my niche, that's where I feel it. So let's hear this all together.
Say something.
And it's a little perfect. It's not pitch. This is perfect. Like, yeah, I finally got that whole riff down. Cause that took a while. Like, this whole idea started with, like, this whole song started with this idea. And I didn't know where to take it for months, but that's in the full track breakdown if you want to see that. So, finish this up. The only other thing that's going on, notes with the same idea of instrumentation and stuff, are these pads, and they're just providing like a drone, which is the chord, same chord as the piano. Actually, this whole track right here is the piano line. Just heavily affected. Contact, native instruments, una corda. That's all it is. Then you have these drones. And there's like this kind of drony thing. I'm going to talk about in the next video something like, so in the comedy world, you have callbacks, you know, you like stand-up comedy, you might say a joke in the beginning of your set, and an hour later you end on a joke that references that first one, so a callback. Happens in TV and stuff. This callback is this same sound right here. Listen to the intro of Spectator Detector. Exact same thing, different note. Just dropped it in. And that's a way to, you know, tie your tunes together, I think. Is like kind of narratively, but that's not what this video about. Anyway, so you got drones that take that harmonic texture, the harmonic color you have, but they're not necessarily doing note for note. It's just a long sound, long wash of sounds. And that just provides a bed for everything else that's going on. So this whole section, as I wrap things up, all together, drones and all.
Say something.
Forgot to add the bass. Anyway, you get it though.
Say something.
All right, so let's do a quick recap. You know, I'll cut this at the beginning of the video. Getting kind of meta here, referencing the beginning of the video at the end of the video, but I'll edit it so it's the beginning of the video. Crazy. Anyway, so look at what you have in what you're writing. Say it's a piano idea, it's any kind of melodic idea. If you want to flesh it out, try taking a piece of whatever it is, probably something chordal. If it is one singular line, build a chord on it, reference a note of that chord, so a voice, this would be voicing, and then double that in another instrument to add a bit of texture, a bit of color, to add depth and musicality. That's kind of a really basic way of putting it. And if you need any reference material, listen to New Tone's latest album. I did a little write-up on Patreon about it. It's free, by the way. Go check it out. But it's all about taking simple ideas. This is a very simple idea right here, this piano thing. It's chords and moving between chords. And like it's easy enough that I basically played it in, and I am not a piano player. Or a good one. Mary Had a Little Lamb. That's my wheelhouse. But taking an idea and making it feel more developed, add a bit more depth, and in turn bringing more musicality within your writing, because this is music. I mean, and this is useful within any kind of genre. This isn't like just a liquid thing or a whatever you want to call it. You'll find this everywhere. Noisia does it. End all be all, Noisia. If they do it, why don't I just do it, you know? People who make rollers do it, as simple as they sound, and they're probably not doing it through this kind of like thought process, but it actually happens. Benny L is it's a good person to look at. He does it, you know? Not often, but Kino, Micus, Urban Dawn, listen to his Gothenburg Cluster album. That that sure, you want something older, jungly, Goldie. If you watch any interview with Goldie and he's like, yeah, the arrangement, man, the arrangement. I'm not gonna try his accent, but it's a huge thing, and it takes it from a basic idea to a fully realized, you know, I don't know what I'm saying, you know, something with musical depth to it, and it doesn't have to be like 20 layers of this and that. It's just simple things here and there. I don't know, give it a try. It's one of those things, like anything, that can be as simple or as complex as you want, but the more complex you try and make it, the tougher it is to pull off. This was hard for me to pull off, which is why I haven't done anything like it since. But enough about me. Check out the track. If you want to check out the full breakdown, I do the same thing, but in a little bit more, in a different way, because I was kind of going through it. I didn't want to focus on it when it's just like a general track breakdown, but you might get the, probably said something else that sounded a bit better than what I'm doing now. But anyway, time to go. Another video to get through. Hope this helps. Comments, all that good stuff. Yeah. Patreon homies, thank you. That's why you get to watch this early. And if you're watching this whenever you're watching it and it's public, well, come on over to Patreon if you feel like it. You know, join us over at Bad Snares Anonymous. We can hook you up with some terrible snares and friendship. That's about what we are. Later.